from Mr. Shannon that we are ready to go. Okay. Bonjour, Jauno Benesikwe, Indigenous Cause, Mangandondem. I am a citizen of Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. I'm also the executive director of Violence Free Minnesota. I'm probably gonna cry. So I got a teaching this morning and it was a reminder of I'm trying to learn my language, Anishinaabe Moan. And one of the words was heart, which is Ode. And we were teasing about how to say tongue because somebody was going to make some tongue soup. And I had this impromptu teaching actually, where the word tongue actually is Ode Nanu, which has heart in it. And the teaching behind it was when the vibration from your heart actually comes from your tongue. So when you speak from the heart, this is the gift piece that comes out when we use that, when we speak. So I want to share that teaching with you today because so many times when we are visiting with community members, when we are serving our community, when we are being good relatives for each other, to ourselves, it's very important to speak from our heart in good ways. So taking good care of self and then taking good care of our community. So I want to say, Chi-miigwech, thank you for everybody that is here. This room is, it's amazing that we are here together, but it's also a tragedy that we have to be here together in this way. So I just want to say I recognize that, Mr. Shannon, and I want to acknowledge the family, the advocates, the community, the teams, all of the people in community who actually make this possible. I am a citizen of Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. I'm also the executive. I'm hearing feedback from Minnesota. I'm probably gonna cry. Sorry. So today we come together, we gather today to recognize at least 39 victims of intimate partner homicide in 2023. And one of the words was heart, which is Ode. And we were teasing, maybe we did a time jump. All right, okay. So this is the highest confirmed numbers that we've had since the data was being collected in 1989. I also want to give acknowledgement for all of the people who previously worked at what was MCBW, the community members, the advocates that held this work before the new staff and the new team stand here before you today. I want to say thank you for that dedication and that hard work that you did. At the same time as violent crime is dropping in Minnesota around the country, this is the highest rates that we've had that we are documenting. And recognizing how pervasive domestic violence really is and how it continues to be an issue affecting every community across our state and our nation. This is actually not just new to Minnesota or a thing that happens here. This is global. Gender-based violence is global. And not only that, we understand the bystanders that are being impacted, the children who have lost family members. The community who is lost has empty seats at their table. And so I want to acknowledge that. Gathering the data this year, at least 49% of the 39 people were people of color, Indigenous, Black, Latino. So that was 19 out of 39. There was 11 women and 8 men this past year. Speaking as a Anishinaabe woman and a Latina, I remember before becoming an advocate, hearing the statistics of 1 in 3 Native women will be raped in their lifetime. We have the highest rates of being murdered, that we have a murdered and missing office. We are starting a Black women and girls murdered and missing office. Minnesota is leading in the ways that we need to lead to make sure that our communities are safer, that we acknowledge that the harms are being done, and we can do better in Minnesota. So with that, I'm going to take a little bit of a pause here because My heart is beating really fast. I can't say all the words that I need to say. But I'm sending blessings and prayers to the family members. I'm sending blessings and prayers to the advocates, the law enforcement that support this. I'm sending just love and prayers. I also want to stress the need for community-based advocacy programs that help and support our communities and our people who are trying to escape violence. That work is not easy. I did it for many years. And it takes a special kind of bravery, a special kind of heart to do that work. To teaching, actually. So at Violence Free, we have over 90 member programs across the state in all 87 counties in Minnesota. And I've been hearing from member programs of how overworked and how the PTSD and the vicarious trauma of working with community members who are surviving violence, of how that is, and the break and how that feels like on our shoulders. And it's not just advocates' shoulders. I know that we as community members feel this weight of on our shoulders, is that what can I do? How do I stop it? So I think we need to start having different conversations around prevention. How do we, this is preventable. All of this is preventable. I want to make sure that we are talking to our communities that identify as culturally specific communities, and they have services for the people, by the people, and how important that is to be seen in your community, to go to help and have options. I also wanted to talk about having, like, for us to have programming for domestic abuse transformation. If it was it's a taught and learned behavior, and so we can unlearn it. But it needs to have support on where to go to get that support of how to unlearn. And we need to have those conversations in our community. So with that, I think I will end my time in front, and I'm so honored to introduce our next speaker, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. Miigwech.
Good morning. Peggy Flanagan, Indigenous Cause, Gijuwe Damu Kwe and Go, Wabaga, Gani Cognan Dun Jaba, Mangan and Nodame. My name is Peggy Flanagan. My Ojibwe name is Speaks with a Clear and Loud Voice Woman. I'm a member of the White Earth Nation, and my family's the Wolf Clan. Guadalupe, I'm grateful for your teaching this morning and for your words and for all of the work that you do. And to everyone in this room, thank you for bearing witness to the remembering of these 39 individuals who have walked on. It's important for us to come together like this and to name every person that we've lost and to tell the truth. We know that gender-based violence, domestic violence, as people try to keep it behind closed doors, it tumbles out into the streets, into our neighborhoods, into our communities, and that each of us has a role in disrupting it. I'm the Lieutenant Governor, but what's most important that you know about me today is that I'm a child witness and I'm a survivor. And I am here in this space because it took me a long time to be able to say that out loud. I became an expert in making myself extremely small. because that's how I learned how to survive, to simply get out of the way. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you and to be with advocates and family and survivors. I want to be clear when I say that domestic violence impacts all of us. That's right, whether we know it or not, we are all connected to someone. It could be at your work, at your places of worship, the gym, college campuses, maybe even your friends or relatives. And what we don't talk about enough is just how pervasive and common gender-based violence and domestic violence is in our communities and to those that we love. Anyone can become a bystander or victim of domestic violence, regardless of their age or their race, sexual orientation, their faith, their class, socioeconomic background, education, or the neighborhood that you live in. Today's memorial is a stark and gut-wrenching reminder of the work that we must do together to disrupt the cycle of violence and continue to call out violence in all of its forms. It can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological in action, or threats of actions that can be used to harm or influence another person in a relationship. And as a state, it is going to take all of us to help break the silence around intimate partner violence by fostering continued education and information sharing across all places and spaces, the people that we work with. And it's why we've invested in our Office of Justice programs for victims of crime by providing grants to organizations that provide services to victims of crime that are not covered by domestic violence, sexual assault, or child abuse services. And I know that you're going to hear from one of our leaders in that work as well. The Public Safety and Judiciary Omnibus also made it possible for the Department of Public Safety to reimburse healthcare providers for the cost of sexual assault examination kits. This is an important step forward in ensuring victims of sexual assault are not charged for medical examinations. We've done a tremendous amount together, and we've done that because of advocates in this room. But we, as Guadalupe mentioned, have so much more left to do. And when I hear that the number of people that we lost this year is higher than ever before when we've begun to measure this, that should be unacceptable. It should be unacceptable to everyone in this room, but everyone outside this room. And I'm glad that the media is here to cover this, because these stories deserve to be told and we have to keep talking about it. And I don't know about you, but I feel like we go in cycles. This issue of gender-based violence, the issue of domestic violence, it ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows in popularity or how people are willing to talk about it. And yet, for those who are immediately impacted, it is always present, it is always urgent, and it is always there. And so that is my job as the Lieutenant Governor, but it also is just my job as a Minnesotan to make sure that we are talking about these issues all of the time. I want to just acknowledge too, as Guadalupe did, the people who've done this work for many years. And I look forward to the day when people can say it was a job well done because we've ended this violence. And we cannot forget to tell all the advocates in this space, all of the organizations and coalitions, the staff at the 90 partner organizations in all 87 counties that live and breathe this work every day to continue to show up. I want you to know that I see you. The state of Minnesota sees you. And I'm here to deliver a message of just immense gratitude for all of you and the work that you do. You are the support that Minnesotans seek during their most vulnerable and fearful and desperate times. You are there for victim survivors when they may have no one else to turn to. And you're the driving force behind action, education, and societal change. Excuse me. And you saved the life of my mother. Do you weather crisis, knowingly submit yourself to vicarious trauma when you simply show up to work? And I want to remind you to take care of yourselves and take care of your spirits as you do this work, because we need you. Please know that the governor and I are with you in this work. And every time you ask us to, we're going to show up. Thank you to Violence Free Minnesota for creating an intentional space for us to remember each precious life and to unite in solidarity for the work that lies ahead of us. Thank you for continuing to honor the families who've had to navigate undescribable loss, systems that were not built out of sympathy or empathy, and centering the voices for victims and survivors in the work that you lead across the community. Chimigwesh for having me today, and may we never forget the names of those that we lost to intimate partner violence. We'll continue to speak those names. We'll continue to remember all of the people who we lost. We will honor them in the work that we do to keep others safe and in the work that we do at the Capitol, but also in our own neighborhoods, in our own homes, in our own families, and in our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Now I would like to introduce Beef 2, Adams.
Good morning, everyone. Yes. I'm going to read from some of my notes, and if they want to play, I'm happy to play with them. It's okay. But in all seriousness, thank you, Executive Director Guadalupe and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, for not only being here and sharing your stories, but being committed to this every day. My name is Beeftree Ibrahim Adam, and my full name is Beeftree Ibrahim Adam Mume Abdacho Wadai Darabai Jisa Bere Madar Unduwako. The reason that I say my full name is because it's deeply important to me, but also the reason that I'm committed to this work. Culturally, I'm Oromo, which is an ethnic group in Ethiopia. I'm a Black woman who was born and raised here in Minnesota to parents who escaped civil conflict and genocide in their home country. And my parents' names are Ibrahim and Munira. My father is a retired social worker. He worked for Hennepin County for a number of years, particularly with families who are impacted by domestic violence every day. And I know that the systems are not perfect, which is why him and my mom raised one of their 4 daughters to make sure that she worked in these systems for as long as she could to do the best that she can. I just want to say that I'm truly honored to be here with you all for this important event. I've been coming to this event for a number of years, and I remember when Violence Free, which was then Minnesota Coalition for Battered Women, was first launching the domestic abuse transformation services, and I got to work as an intern and partner advocate with you all at the legislature many years ago. So thank you for continuing to do this work. Today, I'm here in sort of several roles. I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. I'm here from my commissioner's office. I'm also just here as a little girl from Minneapolis. And what's most important to me is that I'm here as a member of the Missing and Murdered African American Women and Girls Task Force. Serving on this task force is the first task force that the nation has ever had. Thank you for your leadership, Lieutenant Governor, Governor, families, advocates, Violence Free, and Representative Ruth Richardson for championing and leading this work. I'll talk to you all a little bit about where we are in that office. But first, I want to tell you what I've been asked to talk about today. We've already discussed that There were 39 lives lost last year. Any life that is lost is too many. And it's really unfortunate that we continue to see those numbers grow. Of those, 9 of them were Black victims. I'm going to tell you a story of Caleb Bianca O'Neill of Minneapolis, who was killed when she was 9 months pregnant. Her son, Messiah O'Neill, was delivered prematurely and died after 9 days. Violence Free Minnesota did an intimate partner homicide report that specifically looked at the impacts of folks while they are pregnant. In that report, it showed that pregnant women were killed due to intimate partner violence. More so were Black women. 4 out of the 5 homicide risk factors, as identified in Violence Free's homicide report, were present. These factors are a history of violence, threats to kill the victim, victims may be strangled by their perpetrator, access to firearms, and victims attempting to leave the relationship. We know how dangerous it can be when victims are trying to leave their homes. Kayla broke up with her boyfriend just hours before she was shot and killed. Her boyfriend had possession of firearms and was carrying without a permit. He had threatened to kill her before and take her entire family. It's not okay for us to continue to come here and tell the stories of those whose lives have been lost, but it is absolutely necessary that we don't forget them. The Missing and Murdered African American Women's Task Force was launched here in Minnesota just a few years ago. Currently, we're hiring for the first ever director of the Office of Missing and Murdered Black Women and Girls. The work of this office is not only going to be historic, but it's needed. And I think the reality is we can't continue to talk about victims and survivors without acknowledging the stories of survivors, their families, and the true wisdom that people have shared with us. When Research in Action and the Office of Justice Programs launched this task force, often the trends that they saw were that Black women and their families, when they were looking and seeking assistance, that folks didn't believe them more likely than their peers or their white counterparts, that Black women and girls were deemed runaways when that wasn't the case too often, and that there was often blame and villainization placed on those Black women whose families were trying to find them, that somehow they had caused that themselves, and that they were missing because of something that they have done. We know that that's not true. The task force also had an advisory council of those with lived experience themselves that highlighted that these unfortunately was also what they were experiencing. Currently, we're going to hire for this position, and I hope that in February in this month that we'll be able to announce that director. I do want to say, as a Black daughter, I'm just thankful to have been a part of that task force as somebody who worked in advocacy for over 10 years and continues to, but in a bit of a different role. This issue is deeply personal. It's deeply personal to me and my family, and I just thank you all for being here. I ask that today we continue to commit ourselves to building a future that honors and believes victims and survivors, and that honors and believes Black women, and that listens to them and their families. Thank you.
And now I would like to introduce Meton.
Thank you, Guadalupe. 优秀选择. Good morning, everyone. My name is Meton Chan, and I'm the Advocacy Program Director at Transforming Generations. We are a culturally specific organization located in St. Paul, Minnesota, serving the Hmong community within the greater 7 metro area counties. It is with great sadness that every year we must come together to remember and honor those whose lives have been selfishly taken away from them. In 2023, we had at least 39 victims of homicide or murder-suicide, and of which 19 out of those 39 were victims of color. Just within the Hmong community, since 2019, at least 5 Hmong women were shot and killed by their male partners in murder-suicides. Manya Ya in 2019, Bao Ya in 2021, Ga Lao in 2022, Jennifer Ya in 2023, and Joabu Khan in 2023. In all of these cases, the victims were planning to leave or have recently just left their abusive relationships. Domestic violence happens in every community. It also looks different in each community because of cultural practices or beliefs. But ultimately, domestic violence is about power and control. Killing an intimate partner is the ultimate and final act of power and control. Even if no other violence is present in a relationship, the act of killing your partner is itself domestic violence. This is not a case of mental illness or mental health issue. This is an issue of domestic violence. Domestic violence, homicide in Minnesota is overwhelmingly committed by men against their female partners. Usually around 80% or more are women killed by their male partners each year. Murder-suicide involving intimate partners is a uniquely gendered act. Since Violence-Free Minnesota began tracking intimate partner homicides in 1989, 285 people have been killed in murder-suicides. 99.7% of domestic violence murder-suicides in Minnesota from 1989 to 2022 were perpetrated by a man killing his female partner. This is higher than the national rate, which is 90%. Domestic violence-related murder or suicides are violent acts that are overwhelmingly committed with firearms. According to the Violence Policy Center, over 75% of domestic violence murder-suicides in Minnesota are committed with a gun, and the national average is even higher at 83%. I want to bring us back to the 5 Hmong women who I mentioned earlier, and I want to say to their families, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that you had to go through this unimaginable pain of losing a child, a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a mother whom you loved. And to our Hmong community, we need to change harmful practices of pressuring our Hmong daughters to stay within abusive relationships because feeling shameful is more important to you than a life. We need to start believing them instead of victim blaming and trying to justify why they are victims of abuse. We need to stop protecting people who cause harm and start holding them accountable instead. I know that we as a Hmong people know how to love and care for one another. We need to start including victims of domestic violence in our collective care circle. And we can do that by believing them, supporting them, and finding resources to help them to be safe. If you are unsure how to help, you may reach out to Transforming Generations. Our phone number is 651-756-1579. And to all of the families who lost a loved one in 2023, I'm also sorry for your loss. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayton. Now I would like to introduce Kat.
Thank you. My name is Kat Rohn. I'm the executive director for Outfront Minnesota, our state's largest LGBTQ advocacy organization. Outfront Minnesota has been working in the state in different forms since 1987. And throughout that time, we've run an anti-violence program that has helped to both support folks within our communities who are experiencing violence and discrimination of all kinds, but also folks who have experienced intimate partner and domestic violence. I'm here specifically to honor the lives of Savannah Ryan Williams and Daniel Joseph Aldridge, and to represent our state's 2S LGBTQIA+ communities. This is the first year in a number that we've had members of the LGBTQ community who have been represented in this tally that we know of. And I say that because all too often for our communities, our losses are not reported or underreported in many ways. And I think too, especially here on the first day of Black History Month, the impact on our BIPOC communities and particularly on BIPOC trans women who have often been the victims of this violence. I was listening again to a talk from Raquel Willis, who came to the Twin Cities and gave a beautiful talk on her new book at the Westminster Town Hall Forum. And she has spoken at length on violence against particularly Black trans women. And she pulled out a quote from Toni Morrison. "It was the fault of the earth, the land of our town. I even think now that the land of the entire country was hostile to the marigolds that year. The soil is bad for certain kinds of flowers, certain seeds it will not nurture, certain fruit it will not bear. And when the land kills of its own volition, we acquiesce and say the victim had no right to live." It's from The Bluest Eye. And as I shared on Transgender Day of Remembrance this last fall, a lot of people in our community look to the picture of Marsha P. Johnson with the flower crown, but don't think about or talk about the fact that her death still remains unsolved many years later. So many of our flowers are not allowed to bloom, are not given the space. The realities of pervasive racism, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia play out daily for our communities. And they harm all of us, whether you're members of the LGBTQ community or not. Savannah and Daniel had friends and family in these communities, and for all of us, whether we're members of the LGBTQ community or not, these are losses, holes in the communities we live in and walk in daily. For our communities specifically, the statistics are unfortunately very bleak. This last year, our anti-violence program, which runs a helpline, had 2.5 times the number of calls to our anti-violence line than the year before. We're at a time when violence, both individual and systemic, against LGBTQ communities is on the rise. When folks in our communities are facing threats and rhetoric and direct violence on their lives that impacts every bit of how we live and walk within this world. For our communities specifically, 54% of trans and gender expansive people have reported experiencing intimate partner violence at some point in their lives, 54%. 61% of bisexual women will experience intimate partner violence at some point during their lives. Those numbers are higher for folks who are BIPOC, for folks who have engaged in sex work. And unfortunately, the experiences when folks come to seek help are not great either. A 2016 report by the National Coalition for Anti-Violence Programs found that 44% of LGBTQ survivors were denied shelter services when seeking help. And in the 2015 US Trans Survey, more than half of trans and gender expansive individuals reported experiencing mistreatment from law enforcement, and more than half reported saying that they were not comfortable seeking help from law enforcement even when they needed it. That is the lived reality that we deal with daily, and we speak to survivors and overwhelmingly hear stories about how their own shame, the violence that comes at them from a systemic level prevents them from seeking the help, from getting the community, from getting the things that they need to escape violence and to live the lives that they deserve to live. Daniel and Savannah should be with us, as should all the folks whose names we honor and remember today. The violence that affects the LGBTQ community affects all of us. And when we work together to address these intersectional harms, we can end violence for all of our communities. And I'm proud to stand with so many advocates and allies in this work. And I believe and hope that all of us sitting in this room can recommit ourselves to the work of ending this violence as we honor these lives today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. And I would like to now invite Natasha up to speak.
Kuju, Indawe ma gunning Duke, Giniwa Quain Indigenous Cause Magazine and Do Dame. Good morning, my name is Natasha Kingbird. I'm a board member for the Violence Free Minnesota. I am a co-chair on the External Affairs Committee. Currently employed at the Mending of the Sacred Hoop Tribal Coalition as Operations Coordinator. I've been there for 3 months, so I'm really just learning my role. But prior to that, I was employed at the Northwest Indian Community Development Center as a reentry director and worked with women transitioning home from incarceration who have been impacted by domestic violence and sexual violence, and was able to open up a healing house up in Bemidji for women transitioning home. So I'm really proud of that program, that they have a safe place to go and deal with their traumas. So I would like to acknowledge the land that we stand on, and also acknowledge the Dakota 38 +2 who were hung in Mankato, Min, the largest mass hanging in Minnesota, and President Lincoln is the one who ordered that hanging from the Dakota men. Why this is important to remember is because there has been mistreatment of our men, women, and children for decades, and we are left to deal with the grief that comes when people are murdered or taken from us. This year, there's one number away from the people that had passed on this past 2023. So today we honor those who have passed from their abuser. I also want to say thank you to the Violence Free Minnesota staff for all the work that they do, and also a Chimigwich for Guadalupe for representing us, the Native community and this movement in a good way, and for not giving up on her journey. She is an inspiration to Native communities across Minnesota who need voice like hers to make a difference. This year for Homicide Memorial, we would like to acknowledge, I'm sorry, I'm all shooken up too. At least the 39 total victims in 2023, at least 49% were victims of color, 19 out of 39. 11 women, 8 men. 2 victims identified as Native: Savannah Ryan Williams, Jaden Lee Klein. And while I was out there looking at those shirts, I recognized James Kowski. He was a Native at heart, and he came from Bemidji community. He dated this Native woman who was deaf, and he spent a lot of time at our family's house. And so I just wanted to acknowledge him too, because he was Native at heart. Every year, Violence Free Minnesota confirms less Native victims of intimate partner homicide than there truly are in the state. We know we are missing Native victims in our confirmed homicide counts each year. Media under reports on Native murders in general. So yeah, like we talked about earlier, I'm really happy that the media is here. Violence Free Minnesota often hears from Native programs or community members about Native intimate partner homicide victims weeks, months, or even years before anything is reported in the media. Talk about what the Native community, Mending the Sacred Hoop is providing right now. I'm actually employed there and I kind of stepped into a role that, Mending the Sacred Hoop was really kind of rebuilding their program after the pandemic. They're a tribal coalition based out of Duluth, and they serve tribal communities throughout the state of Minnesota. And they were wrapping up some assessments and really hearing from programs across the state on what you guys did and how you serve people through the pandemic, because I know that there was programs, you know, just trying to think of ways to provide services to victims coming home from, you know, incarceration, leaving abusers, stepping into places where they needed to be safe. And so a lot of these advocates, you know, carried some of the secondhand trauma that came along with providing services to victims. And so right now, Mending the Sacred Hoop is actually working on a northern southern transformative adaptation, which will provide a healing space for providers to come together and work on some of the traumas that they're carrying as providers. How you can find out about that is really just look at our website page, our Facebook page, and we can go from there. I'm the operations manager and you can, you know, email me on that. But I think one of the other questions comes with that is, what are the barriers to safety that Native survivors face? And, you know, that's an ongoing question. There's multiple barriers that natives face. Like, as I mentioned before, the incarceration rate, women coming home from incarceration, but not only that, but men who have been abused in prisons and victims in the prisons too. So we also want to acknowledge that space as well. But we also see a lot of racism. We see a housing as a disparity, transportation, etc. Families are in need of food. You know, the poverty rates are high. And so, you know, these programs are able to help when victims need that help. I remember being, I think, a young teen mom in Minneapolis. This is the first place that I've ever experienced domestic violence. And so I remember that there was a little program in the Phillips neighborhood right by the projects by Little Earth. And I didn't know anybody. I was really isolated. And I don't know who it was, but a domestic abuse program came and they offered a space for me to go participate. And, you know, I come from up north and my kids' dad was from down here. So I was really isolated. I didn't have a lot of family, but me going to those groups, being engaged in community and being able to meet people provided me with a little space of hope, resources, and somebody that I could turn to if I experienced domestic violence. So I really appreciate those programs. And I never thought that I would be standing up here talking about this issue, but I think that energy has pulled me towards this way because of the trauma that I have lived through in my past. And so it's another story that came to be was I got to town yesterday and I run into my cousin, and she actually is a survivor, and she's a survivor that she lives down here. She had, you know, she's not mothering her children right now, but I think often we like to judge people and we think about people not taking care of their children, but we forget about all the abuse that she endured, you know, getting hit in the head, you know, being drug around and all those things deals with your mental health and your emotions, and how do we deal with that? And I think that we deal with it in our own way, but with some of these programs, we can provide like cultural healing, we can provide care, we can show them that we care about them, but that goes back to the mental health piece. Like, how are we providing mental health care for our victims? It's not just like one thing, come in the door and then it's over. It's ongoing issues that affect people that are victims. And so, what I can voice here today is that we start providing funding and opportunity for those who have been victims and who are carrying multiple issues that women carry and men carry, and it's ongoing. So with that piece, I just had to acknowledge that space because we need to be mindful of what a person has done to survive from their abuser. With the programs that serve people, I would like to see that we encourage cultural programming and funding for them to provide a space for healing and mentoring so women can feel safe from themselves and others. I would also like to give thanks that they still have their life. I also would like to acknowledge that we survived through the pandemic and continue to help those programs who serve victims. Mending the Sacred Hoop is currently working towards, wrapping up that assessment and providing, healing also to victims in a space where we can do it in our own way. And that's like cultural healing, spirituality, offering that medicine wheel, which is physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental. And so that's really how Native American communities go towards helping our people that have been victims. So if you're interested, please just visit our website, mendingthesacredhoop.org, and follow our Facebook page for upcoming events. And I just want to say thank you for listening and thank you all for showing up for this issue.
All right, now I would like to invite up the VFM men's staff team to, so we can do our memorial and list the names of our community members.
We will now read the names of those that we've lost. Logan Gregory Barham. Kyla Bianca O'Neill. Messiah O'Neill. Manuel Ernesto Bernal Jurado. Jennifer Ya. Adrian Montano Medina. Corina Dawn Woodhull. Madeline Jane Kingsbury. Don Shay Hardy. Joshua Anthony Owen.
Manijay Nicole Starin. Antonio LeVar Moore. Daniel Joseph Aldridge. Sabrina Lee Schnorr. James Craig Kutsky. Angela Marie McClelland. Vicky Marie Salmonson O'Brien. Jua Vu Kang. William Lamont Hudson. Danica Marie Bergeson.
Darisha Bailey Vaught. Jean Harriet Mart. Sarah Catherine Patrick. Betty Jo Bowman. Mary Agnes Corneliuson. Melanie Michelle Jansen. Hannah Nicole Parmenter. Sarah Jane Carta. John Chin Jong. Kayla Rose Halsey.
Justin Capri Boyland. Shakita Monique Thomas. Ricardo Samuel Pena Martinez. Savannah Ryan Williams. Keisha Latrice Moore. Meredith Marie Martell. Franklin Ignacio Orellana. Jaden Lee Klein. Kayla Marie Damaris.
Let's take a moment of silence. I want to say thank you, the families that showed up. I want to say thank you to the advocates. Again, to the community members who support, that don't have an advocate job, who believe and still keep showing up. I want to say thank you. Anybody who's in this room who has survived domestic violence, I'm so happy you're here. I also want to acknowledge the VFMN team for the hard work. I know I was given beautiful words by some of those speakers, but I want to give these people a lot of the credit because they hold the stories in a different way. So I want to say thank you. I love working with you. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud to work here. So with that, I just want to say, my name is Guadalupe Lopez. I'm the Executive Director of Violence Free Minnesota. I'm a mom. I'm a sister. I'm a best friend. I am a cousin. I am a woman. And most of all, I'm one of your relatives, and you were one of mine. Shimmiigwech, and thank you.
This concludes the program portion of the event. There are snacks and beverages out there. Please feel free to grab some. If you haven't already, take a look at the clothesline project that's out there. And thank you all for coming.
No.